So after a brief hiatus to run for public office, I am delighted to welcome Scott McMahan back to the show from The Bigger Truth. Scott, how are you?
I'm great, Jason. Thanks so much for having me. It's really an honor.
It's very good to see you again. Now, I think a lot of people are following you on X at Bigger Truth, and they watch the Bigger Truth show. But for people who maybe haven't seen you in a little while, just fill us in before we get underway today on exactly what it was you were running for. And you got a little bit jammed up in a way that I think we need to talk about a bit. Fill us in on what happened there, if you could.
Yeah, I ran for county commission in here in Lapeer County, Michigan, and I won with 75% of the vote. And uh, it's a very kind of long and interesting story, and I think it has something to do with some of the characters that we might be talking about today.
Yeah.
But there were some people directly connected with some of these characters who had knowledge before I ever did that there were felony charges reportedly coming to me for
Wow.
and they alleged that I had falsified my affidavit, that I'd lied about the address that I live at when I filed to run,
But
and it
it's
wasn't true.
important that we tell everybody it was not only was it not true, it's been completely dropped, right?
Well, not only that, but I was never actually charged. And I mean, Jason, have you ever heard of a prosecutor? And this was a special prosecutor that was appointed by Democrat Dana Nessel, the state attorney general. Have you ever heard of a prosecutor um, notifying a local reporter that there were felony charges against someone when there were not?
Wow. I'm not sure that I have heard about that. That's
I've
crazy,
never
though.
heard of it, and I've never talked to anybody that's heard of it. I talked to my sheriff about it, and he's been law enforcement his entire life. He's never heard of anything like that. Uh,
Huh.
it is absolutely astounding that that happened. And what was even more interesting is that, so this was a Democrat prosecutor, and talked to Democrat-run local paper that very few people read, by the way, outside of county and township and city employees in our county, and it's a small county. Uh, Almost nobody reads it. I mean, the local citizens barely read it. But within an hour and a half of that story, where in the headline it said that I lied on my affidavit, it didn't even say allegedly. It said that I lied on my affidavit, um, and yeah, it says charged with lying about residency. I wasn't charged, but within an hour and a half of
Wow.
that going live on this website, Ivan Raiklin is retweeting it,
Ooh.
and then Flynn retweets it. He calls me a horse's ass. Roger Stone retweeted it. He said, and because it says right in the story, in the first sentence of the story, that I was facing 5 years in prison for it. And he said, Roger Stone says 5 years is not enough for this piece of human garbage.
Oh, my God.
Laura,
Why does
Laura,
Roger Stone have beef with you?
because I've said that he's working against Trump and MAGA. So, and
Hmm.
I've shown the case, So I've
Wow.
I've showed how his own words have been harmful politically to Trump and to Republican parties, and his involvement. I've exposed his involvement with what I believe are insurgents within state Republican parties that are working to take over and take down the state parties.
Wow.
So
S-
yeah, Laura Logan and Vandersteel, the entire Flynn network, they all shared it.
Yeah.
As you've seen them do. They all shared it. They all identified themselves with my face sharing this story, and it was really something to watch. So it was seen over 500,000 times. That one story was
Wow.
seen more than all of the rest of that small town paper, this Democrat-run papers, or the rest of their
Wow.
stories for the entire year combined. And
That's unbelievable.
so
So, I mean,
yeah.
what is this thing, the county press? And I mean, what about these two guys who wrote it? Is there any kind of I mean, obviously, look, I'm not trying to encourage legal action. It's always miserable. But what about David Fleet Enema and Wes Smith?
Yeah. So that I talked to the editor of the paper. He said that they were going to take that story down. That hasn't come down yet.
Oh,
So we will see. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but there are actually, I think there are several people that I could have legitimate complaint with, especially I would say Joel Altman, who is the or has been, I don't know if he still is, the chief operating officer for Frank Speech, which is Mike Lindell's media empire that's now a publicly traded company via reverse merger. And
Wow.
he has repeatedly said on X that I'm a pedophile, and
I've
without
seen
any
him say
evidence at
that.
all.
Now, what does he
Yeah.
base that on? Does he have any evidence? Is there any allegation
Uh,
that he just
the
says
the
it?
on- yeah, the first person that actually insinuated that actually was Thomas Schoenberger. So
Thomas Schoenberger.
yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, see, because our topic today is just social engineering, and I featured one of the classic morons in the world of social engineering, Robert David Steele. He's almost like the patron saint. I don't know. This came a bit from AI, so I don't know what that halo around the back of his head is, but it seems almost like a Salvador Dali painting of a saint. And of course, he's got the Bible of Q in his hand there.
It's really I thought that this was a brilliant piece. That
Thank you.
that image is just fantastic.
And because remember, he told Alex Jones that NASA was sending children on a 20-year mission to Mars to be slaves on Mars. I can't believe that he was spewing that nonsense and expects to be kind of taken seriously by anybody. I don't know if you remember this, but actually NASA, they responded to this. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, so this was back in 2017 when I was dealing with Robert David Steele, or rather, he was dealing with me, I guess. This all came about, and yeah, NASA actually responded and said, no, NASA is not kidnapping children to send to Mars. This was nonsense. But, Robert David Steele has put forth a lot of bizarre things. He was pretty closely associated with QAnon or Q or whatever it is. I know people like to correct me when I talk about Q versus QAnon. I don't know that I want to get into those kind of details. Are we even allowed to still talk about it? It used to be a topic that would just get you straight banned off of YouTube for even bringing it up.
It's interesting. Um I I I kind of consider myself to be an agnostic on Q. I don't think that, and I've had Jeff and Shannon with the MG show, and they are very, they're very much in favor of Q and big promoters of Q, and we talked about the origins of the Q influencer movement, and Q is I was never really into it. I never really read the posts, but I'm interested in it as just kind of a political organization or a political uh
Phenomenon.
phenomenon, really, and
Yeah,
and also um an intelligence operation, which I think everybody pretty much agrees that it's an intelligence operation. I think the Q adherents, the believers that Q is good, they see it as an intelligence operation where the white hats within the government are, or in Trump's orbit or something, are feeding them information. I don't think that
right.
it's a conspiracy theory. I think that there certainly are conspiracy theories that are believed by many people, but really the interesting thing, and the what fascinated me when I interviewed Jeff and Shannon, was that the way that they described how Flynn and his network of people really deliberately and systematically took over the Q influencer movement. And so this was the collective of and they formed a collective of Q influencers who were doing the decodes and saying, this is what these posts mean. Because a lot of what is written by Q is, somewhat cryptic and without context that most people can really read it and understand what these posts are talking about. Um, and
Right.
and I think kind of because of that, a lot of the old posts are kind of recycled, and numerology is applied in ways that I personally that is something that doesn't appeal to me personally. But the question really that I don't think anybody really knows is whether or not Q was a white hat operation or a black hat operation. And depending on who you ask, you get very different responses to that. And I'm totally comfortable with allowing that to be a mystery that I don't really need to get that involved in.
Well, it's funny though how there's the very fact that talking about it would get you banned off of social media, and of course it was
Oh, yeah.
closely associated with January 6th. This guy Jacob, whatever his name is, was the QAnon shaman, and then he was upset if you called him the QAnon shaman. But here he is. We're holding this sign. I mean, he is holding it, right? It says Q sent me. Yeah, he's holding it. So he is the QAnon shaman. He's not the QAnon shaman. He had this Thor's hammer tattooed on his stomach and other Nordic symbols on him. When I brought that up after he got out of jail, he got very upset, insisted that he wasn't a Nazi, and I think blocked me. I'm just pointing out that he seems to have been a symbol of the event. Here, we can see some of these Nordic symbols. He seems to be a symbol of the event that, in my view, was intended to draw supporters of Donald Trump into this highly destructive, anybody who went into the Capitol building basically had their life ruined. And anybody who even show up there, they tried to smear. I mean, even if you were in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, and this has happened to me quite a bit in court, George Webb's brother, he's tried to paint me as an adherent of this movement, where the very second it arrived, I said, I don't trust this at all, whatever it is, QAnon, white hat, black hat. I agree with you that calling it a conspiracy theory, that's stupid. That's something that like the Washington Post attempts to do, to just make your average sort of normie consumer of mainstream news say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theories are bad. I'm not going to pay any attention to that. And that's how we see it treated in basically all of these mainstream things, NPR and whatever. 4 years after the Capitol riot, why QAnon? Here it is, December, just a few months ago, still talking about it. It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. It is. And even though it's been now all coming up on 3 years since there's been a post. And I also think that it's interesting that, that there's such a spectrum of belief by the people who believe in Q. So, there's so many people that have followed Q and various Q influencers, and they many of them believe very different things on particular topics, and Flynn is one of those. I think that there's this group that particularly around the MG show and Script Keeper and some other groups that some other influencers that are very much opposed to Flynn. They see the destructive influence that Flynn has had, and they interpret statements by Q about Flynn to be more of a warning about Flynn than a validation of Flynn. And but then you've got all these other Q influencers who are still within the Flynn network that obviously are very pro Flynn, and they interpret Q posts about Flynn as being very much validation and in favor of him. And so but there's many different issues like that even just recently, the promotion of Kane, General Kane, Raising Kane, as to a 4-star general, and his involvement in Iran. And so a lot of these Q followers are saying, well, this is America's general, because apparently Q talked about America's general. And whereas a lot of the Flynn influencers have talked about, well, the America's general is Flynn. Flynn is America's general. And which is part of the brand that he's adopted for himself. So he's really tried to glom onto Q and to grab as much, to grift off of Q in a lot of ways, while also rejecting Q, because he also talks about Q in a very derogatory way.
Flynn does, you're saying?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
it's interesting.
It's fascinating how they used the they set up Discord channels, and they had this whole method of bringing in and drawing in by invitation. It was a very sophisticated military intelligence influence operation to bring in and develop this Q influencer network that had a higher allegiance to Flynn than to Trump. And ultimately, it is, they all say that they support Trump, right? But until they don't. And that's really, and we've seen that in the last week very strongly. There's so many people that all of a sudden they're doing everything they can to sow hatred of Trump. So
Yeah. Well, let me focus on Discord with you for a second, because I've always found this really weird. Why would you want to name a chat application Discord? I mean, isn't Discord like argument and strife? Why wouldn't you name it Discuss or Discourse or something like that?
it's an excellent question. And it was fairly new then. And,
Right.
I just, um, it's a tool like any others, and I've seen it used pretty effectively for creating, kind of a members only discussion group. But um yeah, it's a very controlled environment for discussion. And the Flynn network really tends to like those, that like they like Telegram, because they can kick anybody out, they can mute anybody, and so they can really control the conversation. They can eliminate, they can gatekeep the conversation. And so Discord, I think, is a very useful tool for that, especially.
It's strange. I don't know too much about this guy, Dan. Didn't Discord play some role in Gamergate?
Yeah, I did actually. That's not something that I've looked into a lot, but I do remember reading about that.
Because we see this guy. I just had it here a second ago. His name is Dan. Where is he? He just disappeared. It's created by Dan, whatever. Here, Jason Citron. Okay. And so he also founded something called Open Faint, a social gaming platform. Now, I mean, isn't a feint like a fake move? They were talking about how launching these B-2 bombers in the opposite direction of Iran was a feint to try to deceive whoever, the Iranian defenses. So what is with this guy? He's creating things about open feints and Discord. He's sort of telling you exactly what he's doing, isn't he?
As he very well may be. And that's so much of the media world. And where there's just it's so much is just an intelligence operation against us, where we're being told what to believe.
You're right.
And that goes back to the title of this show, even, the social engineering, which is, and that goes to Aquino's Mind War. And Aquino and Vallely wrote in 1980 Mind War, and Aquino he was the first openly satanic army chaplain. He was actually kicked out of the Church of Satan. He started the Temple of Set. And what Mind War is all about is creating, it says we have to tell the truth of the present,
Right.
as well as the truth of the future. And
Right.
so this truth of the future is the future that they create by telling us and putting in our minds the beliefs that they want us to hold, so that we act the way that they want us to act.
And if I'm not mistaken, that approach is coming from like Aleister Crowley's Thelema, where there's a certain set of rules, and telling you, exactly what it is that they're doing is part of their like weird morality, where if they're telling you, it's your fault that you don't get it, we're telling you what's up. So, I mean, here, a feint is a deceptive or pretend blow, a thrust or other movement, especially in boxing or fencing. So this guy's talking about an open feint. He's just openly pretending right in front of your face. He's creating discord. They're introducing this QAnon movement, whatever it is, through Discord. And so there's a number of people. We should also mention you and I are going to be doing a sponsor exclusive segment for this show. People are going to be able to get that broadcast on biggertruthmedia.com. Also, people who are sponsoring Crowdsource the Truth, whether it's on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com or subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, they'll also get that broadcast. It's interesting, Scott. I had been moving a lot of people towards Odyssey because it was a really open platform that allowed freedom of speech and allowed everybody to say whatever they want. And they had a payment processing system going on there. And it got attacked relentlessly. The bank dropped them. It can't process payments anymore. So for the past 3 months, people who are subscribed to Crowdsource the Truth on Odyssey are getting the sponsor exclusive shows for free, but I'm no longer earning any money from it because the people who want to destroy our ability to access the First Amendment, whether it's you and I speaking freely or people in the audience getting to choose what they hear, when there is something like Odyssey that allows us to do that and creates a mechanism through which we can do that, they have to attack it. It's really sick.
It is. It is. There, so much of the media is just, they have to have control, and I think that's why they came after me. That's why they've done the kinds of things that they've done to you, and I see them doing these kinds of things to people that have even very small accounts that just raise questions and do their own research and share some evidence, and where very similar tactics, this kind of like online cyber stalking, and there's various kinds of cryptic threats, hacking, actually planting CSAM materials on people's devices, some really, really dangerous and criminal activity. And these are, they all kind of use the same tactics. They have multiple accounts. They're very twisted in the way that they use language, and deceptive, and they always twist everything to try to make you feel like you're evil. And they accuse you of being evil, and they like to talk about Judas a lot. And there's just
Oh,
it,
yeah.
yeah, and all of that. There's some very, very, very dark stuff, and it connects to people. And I've shown how on a lot of this really amplified for me when I showed on a podcast how Thomas Schoenberger is connected to, in a deposition, he admitted that he was working and had worked extensively with Bijan Kian at the Pentagon. And Bijan Kian was
Huh.
on the board of directors for the Flynn Intel Group. And so
Huh.
I take from that Bijan Kian is a handler type of for both of them. And after I said that, that's when Thomas Schoenberger made a public death threat, very thinly
Whoa.
veiled, towards me, and indicated that I that there was going to be a pedophile's death, and um, and so yeah, I've reported that to law enforcement. And
And what did they
uh,
say when you reported that?
oh, it just got reported. What are they going to do? Um, but I do believe that there's something in the works. I mean, there is an investigation, but yeah, that's not something I can talk about right now.
I got it. No problem. Now, so let me ask you something here. Bijan Kian, I haven't heard that name before now. This is why it's so fascinating to talk to you, Scott, is that you and
Mhm.
I have different pieces of this puzzle, and whenever we talk, I learn new things. So look at this. This is from, when is this from? Just a year or two ago. Prosecutors dropped charges against Bijan Kian, a one-time. Oh, yes, this guy was connected to the Turkey prosecution, right?
Exactly. He's the one that connected Flynn and Alptekin, who was the one that who paid Flynn $530,000 on behalf of Erdogan and the Turkish government while Flynn was on Trump's 2016 campaign. And
Interesting.
and it's what's particularly fascinating about that whole thing is Bijan Kian and Alptekin were both indicted and prosecuted, but Flynn was never charged. And Flynn was the principal. This was the Flynn Intel Group that was paid, and he was never charged, but Bijan Kian and Alptekin were. And he claims all the time that he's like, they ruined his life and they went after his family, and this is, he's a victim, it's terrible
Oh,
what the
he's making
government
more
did to
money than
him.
ever right now, isn't he?
Yeah, well, and he never spent a day in prison. He made hundreds of thousands of dollars in profit on his defense fund. So, he never, these claims that they were caused financial ruin is false.
Yeah.
And they he claims to have a part. He's about to release this book called The Pardon of Innocence. Like he got some sort of special pardon, and it's addressing the question that really arose and became mainstream in November, when November, December, when Biden was issuing all these crazy pardons, and people were saying, "Hey, you don't need a pardon if you're innocent," right?
Right.
And Biden was doing these preemptive
Ah, so
pardons.
now he's got the book about how he's
Yep.
pardoned even though he's innocent. Although that's not the way the
Yeah.
law works. I think
Yeah. He's
that there's a legal precedent that when you accept a pardon, it is an admission of guilt. So this is interesting, Scott. Well, listen, we're we're just about out of time here on our introductory segment, but people are going to be able to follow us on the sponsor exclusive segment. If people aren't following you on X, they can get you there at Bigger Truth. They should also follow you on Substack. People can go to biggertruthmedia.com. That leads right to your Substack page, and our sponsor exclusive video will be on there. Also, of course, sponsors of Crowdsource the Truth are going to get the video. People who follow me on X at JG_CSTT and subscribe will get the video. You can also get it on all the other Crowdsource the Truth sponsorship channels. We got a lot to discuss. We're going to look into more about some of these extremely shady social engineers who are doing all of this stuff, talking about some things that even people who've been watching Crowdsource the Truth for 8 years might not have seen before. So stay with us, stay tuned. We'll be right back. Thanks for watching, everybody.